Thank you, Karen. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with you. Good day yesterday? Fantastic, huh? I'm going to talk to you about something regarding the opportunity of ASEA. I spent, really before I came to ASEA, I spent over 17 years in sales-driven or distribution-driven organizations. And one of the things that you learn very early on is that people come and people go. And that is sometimes a very difficult thing, just emotionally or psychologically sometimes to deal with. Have you ever experienced that? Where you have people who you had every expectation that they were going to be absolute superstars, and they come in and they don't necessarily materialize or develop the way you thought. Has that ever happened? Anybody here? Yeah, it's pretty universal. It can be frustrating, right? It can be difficult. It can be difficult to see good people who don't always turn out the way that or realize the potential that we see in them or think they have. And other times, too, we have people who maybe we don't necessarily have a tremendous amount of expectations for, and they come in to be some of our greatest highlights, right? So it's very difficult to kind of predict. But a lot of times, sales-driven organizations, this was true in financial services, I think this is true in network marketing, is that a lot of times people look at the number of people sometimes who do come and go, and they somehow diminish the opportunity because of that. And I never really bought into that, because I know that any industry has barriers to entry. It's just, where do those barriers to entry come into play? And there's a great saying about opportunity. And the problem with opportunity is that we miss it a lot of times, because when it knocks, it's dressed in overalls and it looks like work. But I'd like to talk to you for just a minute about something that hopefully will help you as you sometimes have to deal with the emotional highs and lows associated with seeing people come and go. Because one of the things that to be a leader in this organization, and certainly in this industry, is you have to be able to muscle through some of those temporary setbacks. If you were going to go into any business or any profession, every industry or profession has what are called barriers to entry. For example, if we were going to, let's say that we got together, 4 or 5 of us, and we wanted to go into the offshore oil drilling business. Are there barriers to entry to that? Yes, so much so that we would have to have tens of millions, if not hundreds of $millions in capital to even have a legitimate discussion about something like that. I mean, we all can kind of identify with the complexities of doing something like that. But a barrier to entry is just something that impedes our ability to do it. ASEA has barriers to entry. Essentially everything that we want to do, I'm actually going to skip over this part just in the interest of time. But I wanted to use an analogy to kind of put in perspective this concept of the kind of the emotional baggage to build off Denny and Alyssa's theme yesterday of this baggage that we carry around, this baggage, because sometimes we minimize the opportunity because we see people come in and don't necessarily realize it. So I went back and looked at medical doctors. Can we all agree that a medical doctor is a highly respected profession? Of course, right? And I'm talking, just for this example today, I'm talking about an MD or a DO, many of which are in this room. We have many doctors here to see, many are with us here today. But I wanted to show you something that may help change your perspective in terms of how you view what you do and the opportunity that you have to offer to people. So if you want to go to medical school, speaking in generalities, there's certain ways around this, you have to go to get an undergrad degree, which usually takes about 4 years. It's usually in pre-med or zoology or something along those lines of biology. And then you have to take a thing called the MCAT. What is the MCAT? Dr. Michael.
It's a rigorous pre-admission exam. You have to try your best to get high scores on it.
There you go. The MCAT is the Medical College Admissions Test. If you want to go to medical school, the MCAT is a barrier to entry. Okay? Just like if you want to go to law school, you have to take the LSAT, the Law School Admissions Test. If you want to go to business school, you have to take the GMAT, the Graduate Management Admissions Test. Every specialty really requires a barrier to entry to get through. Medical school has another barrier of entry called organic chemistry, right? Many of med school dreams have been dashed on the rocks of organic chemistry. So, now you say, well, everybody who becomes a doctor stays a doctor, right? Not necessarily, but a lot of them do. But some don't. Well, why is that? Well, because of what it takes to actually become a doctor. You're going to quit trying to be a doctor before you ever become a doctor if it's not for you. And the first way that you do that is, first of all, again, talking about barriers to entry, the average debt of a medical school student in 2018 was upwards of $190,000, which actually sounded low to me for medical school. And more than 57% of those students have more than $200,000 of debt graduating from medical school. Now, what does it take to be a doctor? Usually 4 years of undergrad, take the MCAT, you get into medical school, which is another 4 years, and then you go into this thing called a residency, right? And a residency is where you're kind of a practicing doctor, but you're not licensed to operate on your own. You have to operate or practice under the supervision of another physician or an attending physician. So a lot of barriers to entry. And then your residency can last anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 years if you get into some of the surgical specialties. But if you go back now and say, somebody says, I want to go to medical school, so I'm going to take the MCAT. In 2018, 87,000 people in the United States took the MCAT with the intent of what? With the intention of what? Going to medical school, okay? The actual number of students who applied for medical school in 2018 was 53,000, 53,042. So you can see, while there may be some overlap in years, we're again applying some very basic yet legitimate generalities here, that the MCAT weeded out a lot of people right off the bat, right? So over 30,000 students decided, yeah, maybe I didn't want to be a doctor so bad after all, after I took the MCAT, right? And the actual number of students who got accepted into medical school that same year, 2018, was 21,030. So a lot of people self-selected out. Other people who actually applied didn't get in. They did not get in. And this is what's really interesting, is that if you look at medical school graduates from 2018, now granted they would have started in the process some 8 years previous to this, because again, you're upwards of 11 years just to be able to practice medicine in this country. If you look at the 19,553 and you actually contrast that to the actual number of people who took the MCAT, only about 22.5% of people who set out with the intention to be a doctor ever become a doctor. Now, because they have almost an 80% attrition rate of people not making it, does that in any way delegitimize being a doctor in this country? Of course not. Just like someone who comes into our business who isn't an overnight success or sensation does not make the offering illegitimate. It is a very legitimate thing that we do. It's just that the barriers to entry to what we do are on the back end. Medical school is all on the front end. So of course, by the time you get through 12 plus years of being a doctor, you're probably going to stay a doctor in some capacity, not always. Some people branch out in other things and have more of a business flair or go into other specialties that don't necessarily involve practicing. But again, just because about 80% of people don't make it doesn't mean that being a doctor is not a very noble, significant thing. Now, this is really interesting because, keeping on this doctor theme, because it's something I think we all identify with, and most of our parents wanted us to be one at some point in our lives. Doctors work incredibly hard to become a doctor, but they work incredibly hard to be a doctor. If you look up here, here are some of the common practices. We picked some that we thought everybody would at least be able to relate with in some regard or know what they are. This is for residents. Again, this is when you're out of medical school, but you're still operating under the supervision of another doctor. Residents work insanely long hours And you can see up here the average number of hours a week that they earn and the amount of pay that they get for those 3 to 5 to 7 years as they continue to hone their craft and become professionals. But the point that I would impress upon you with this is that it's very, very demanding. It takes an incredible amount of work. Now, that work will pay off once you actually graduate, complete your residency program. Can you make a significant amount of money as a doctor? Absolutely. You should, right? You've earned it. You've paid the price to be there. So, yes, and these are just some averages. Again, there's many people making more. There's many people making less, but these are the averages pays for these particular specialties here. Now, what's the point of all this? The point is that yesterday Justin Wilson showed to you an updated income disclosure statement, right? Okay. And again, with this concept of what our opportunity represents and the legitimacy of what you offer and the opportunity that you offer, do you remember what those numbers look like? Yeah, that's amazing. That is incredible. That a triple diamond in this company is making upwards of what any of the most highly specialized doctors at their profession make. And that is a very real thing. These are real numbers. These are real checks that are paid to people. And what you have in front of you is a very real, legitimate business opportunity that you do not need to apologize to anybody for doing it. Just because some people come and some people go, it does not mean that the industry or the profession is any way less than. This represents an enormous, enormous opportunity for you. And hopefully this is just to show perspective. Perspective that anything that's worthwhile in life doing has barriers to it. There's difficulty associated with it, just like you have to overcome people's emotional objections, their psychological objections, a lot of the things that we go through as we go out and try to share this great product and opportunity and culture with the world. They're there. They're always there. But the thing I would impress upon you is do not let the low barrier of entry to ASEA in any way cloud your vision of what this opportunity actually represents. Because what is the barrier to entry of ASEA? $40. $40. Guys, thank you so much. It's great to be with you. Enjoy. You're the best. Thank you for an incredible year, guys. Thanks.